Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. It's our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and the Blast market. We're going to get into some opportunities over on Blast, explain some of our thinking, what's going on there for the moment. But before we get there, I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary, and we also have Sammy on stage with us, on cam with us too. We also got NFT Stats on stage, Matthew on stage, Jack on stage, Oxy on stage. Cannot wait to get into a discussion on all the things which is in the snapshot, which is pinned up top, your daily dose of news. We're going to get to all of that in a moment, but just a reminder, nothing that we say here is financial advice because we do not know anything for sure, unfortunately. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, how are you doing this Tuesday, the 13th of February? A lot of people in the comments saying happy Tuesday. So happy Tuesday to you. Are you having a happy Tuesday?
GM Jim, I think I'm hearing myself. Weird.
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you fine.
Yeah, but I'm hearing myself in my headphones. I'm hearing an echo.
Oh no.
All right, let me try to talk to it. I think I'm doing quite well.
Tuesday.
What?
Not a happy Tuesday.
Not a happy Tuesday. I can't hear you if you talk while I'm talking because I hear myself with a bit of a lag.
Do you want to take a second to try to figure it out?
Yeah, let me see what's going on there.
To Sammy. Sammy, are you having a happy Tuesday?
I am indeed. Yeah, it's good to be back in the market. Although I'm looking outside now, it's absolutely chucking it down with rain in London. So yeah, looking back to times being away is better. But yeah, it's nice to be back in the market and kind of get a little bit stressed again because there's a lot going on. So trying to choose those opportunities wisely.
You're cutting out just a touch, but hearing you mostly okay. Sounds like a little bit of stress, a lot of stuff going on. I can't agree with you more. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to talk about during the course of the show. Legendary, are you back with us? Do you think things are okay?
Let me try again. This is better, right? Yeah, wonderful.
There we go.
No voices in my head. No, I've been having a happy Tuesday. Did a bit of portfolio reallocation this morning. Did a bit more on the NFT lending side of things. Did a bit more on Camino and Solana. So again, increased basically my allocation of free flow, of free cash flow into airdrop farming protocols, and been having a blast with it. No pun intended.
How much are you, not literally in terms of a dollar amount, but are you preparing for Blast? Like, are you setting aside some in your head, like, right, this is going to be Blast related? We're going to get into a bigger discussion on that in a moment, but like, is it on your mind? Have you been thinking about it? What are your thoughts?
It is definitely on my mind. I mean, given the fact that I've seen so many protocols reach out for KOL rounds as well for Blast build protocols, knowing that there's going to be this massive distribution of Blast tokens to people building dApps on Blast as well. I've been thinking around where I want to allocate that capital from, if I'm going to pull something from Solana and throw it into Blast, because I'm at the point where like almost all of my capital is doing something productive. So I don't have that much sitting around that I want to use, or if I just start to borrow more against my own NFTs on ETH to throw that into Blast, I haven't arrived to a final conclusion on how I want to structure that yet.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Like, I'm just doing a different or another private round. I think I'm signing it today. I have to send the money over, and I'm pretty sure that means there is no money left. Like, there is no spare capital left. Yes, there's spare capital that's like, as you say, like doing things in protocols or whatever. But that was the last chunk that was just sitting in USDC, kind of sitting around. So definitely one to think about as we try to manage the period that we're going into. I want to talk about the period we're going into as well, kind of placing where we are in the bull market now that I hope people have accepted that we are actually in one at a minimum. But we'll get into that discussion in a moment. For the people who are just joining, we will touch, and crypto absolutely ripping. We're going to get into this Blast opportunity and what we see happening over there as they've announced some big news, and also the airdrop taking place on Bitcoin, as if there isn't another area to kind of stay on top of and make sure we need to know what's going on there. We've got that to look at too. So let's get into it, starting with the price action. I'm going to share the screen. As always, this information is provided to you from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you find that it brings you some value, please do give it a like. Let's get into it. Starting with the price action, Bitcoin finally hit 50K. It's holding above it at the moment. It's up 4%. ETH is up 7% at 2.6K. And Solana was up 9% at $114. The exact kind of expected trend of increases: Bitcoin a lower amount, ETH slightly higher, Solana slightly higher, Ape up a few percent at $1.5. In terms of the headlines, we've got the crypto move as the first headline. We've got the second headline, which is Blast announces 3,000 teams have registered for the Big Bang competition. Want to discuss that in just a moment. And finally, Karma airdrop announced for top ordinal communities in the largest airdrop in ordinal history. The details were provided, and the Karma coin will be airdropping to the following communities: Node Monks, Bitcoin Puppets, Bitmaps, Arsic, Bitcoin Frogs, Bitcoin Punks, and Ordinal Maxibiz. Notable exclusion there are the Quantum Cats, which I thought was a bit strange, interesting to note. So gonna discuss that in just a moment. Some top sales: we had an EtherRock selling for 279 ETH, which is $740,000, and that does make sense because it's a blue one. So you've got to take that into consideration. We had a CryptoPunk Shade selling for 65.5 ETH, that's 174,000, and a nice Fidenza selling for 70 ETH, that is now $186,000. In terms of the floor prices, we've got CryptoPunks at 58.7, Bored Apes at 22.8, down 1%, Mutants at 4.2, DGods at 2.9, Captains at 4.4, Azukis at 6.5, Penguins down almost 6% at 19.2 after they had broken the 20 ETH barrier again. New addition, Mad Lads. It looks strange denominated in Solana there. That's what I'm trying it out for the moment. 159 Sol, down 3%. Nouns at 6.8 ETH, winning bid. That is the price action legendary. Those are the headlines. Any numbers standing out to you before we get into the main headlines in a moment?
Definitely the EtherRock. I feel like it's a bit of EtherRock season. We had all shades of EtherRock selling. We had that one, was it at Christie's or at Sotheby's? I think it was Christie's, right?
I think it's about to. I don't know if that one is sold yet, but yeah, it's going to be sold if it hasn't already.
So it's kind of beautiful to see that pattern repeat from the last bull market, when you have BTC running up, then ETH is lagging behind, then ETH is catching up. Once ETH is catching up, you also see a bit more of the high value sales on some of the more degenerate collections or historical collections, depending on which side of the which stance you're taking with EtherRock. But definitely like to see those sales coming through.
Yeah, very, 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 very fun to see those sales going through. Sammy, anything catching your eye before we hit the headlines?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same. I think the EtherRock stuff is quite interesting. I think it's like 1.7 million for 3 rocks, and going back to 2021 around that August time, seeing that catalyst for the bull run last time, just hitting that headline news, like pictures of rocks selling for ridiculous amounts of money. So it'd be interesting to see if that comes back around this time and it hits mainstream media.
Very fair. I wonder whether the rocks are indicative of, I don't know if you'd read too much into it. I think the point has been made that they're just selling for huge amounts, a little bit of a run on them. People like the rocks. A lot of people got annoyed that people buying the rocks. There's no need to be annoyed. It's people's money. They're going to spend it however they like. And some people clearly really want to buy really expensive digital rocks. So that's clearly one of the conclusions from the last week. Let's get into the first headline, which is Bitcoin, about purely crypto. Let's talk crypto first before we get into Blast and Karma coin. So Bitcoin's hit 50K, ETH, which is up 4%. ETH is up 7% to 2.6. Solana is up 8%. Legendary, you mentioned, I think I mentioned it kind of going in order, like Bitcoin being this amount, ETH being that amount, Solana being a little bit more. That's the first time in a while for me that I've thought that's the order that things are supposed to be in. Because often, like up until now, Solana's been like doing crazy stuff and like always outperforming, for example, and ETH has been heavily underperforming. Is this like the natural order of things for Bitcoin to be moving up, ETH to be moving up slightly more, and Solana to be moving up slightly more than that? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I like how you call it natural order of things.
Yeah,
I
like
think,
but is that fair? Is that reasonable or
I
not?
think in terms of the like volatility that we've seen with those assets, it makes the most sense, because I would argue that BTC is a bit less volatile than ETH. ETH is less volatile than Sol. So on an upwards movement, you expect that to be the natural order of things. Obviously, there is individual news that can change that course. But personally, in looking at my own portfolio allocation, I like this natural order of things because it very much fits how I have my own coins and cryptocurrencies distributed. And it did feel for at least a couple months that ETH was lagging behind. Also found it quite amusing on that note to see that Loopify posted, and for those who have been following Loopify for a while, Loopify kind of said that he is selling all of his ETH at 3K. And now that we're getting closer to the 3K mark and Loopify is getting increasingly more bullish, he's like, yeah, might adjust the target a bit more upwards.
Yeah. I mean, it's just classic, isn't it? It's always going to happen. That happens. Basically, that happens all the time. A different version of that is when you say to yourself after a big gain, like you're going to put certain amount into stables, and like you're just not going to touch that certain amount, right? And then you start to think, oh, hang on a sec. Like, what if I just took a little bit of it in order to do this particular farming thing or whatever? Not recommended, but worth keeping in mind.
The temptation is so strong, right? I feel it. I had my stable stash, and I've been going through a lot of my stable stash to be like, look, hey, there's parcel. I only have to deposit USDC, and it's only gonna be locked for a couple of weeks. So if the protocol doesn't get exploited within the next month, I should be golden, right? So I do get the temptation to touch the things you aren't supposed to touch.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously there is protocol risk, which could make any of these things blow up at any point in time. So that's definitely the thing to keep on top of. Interesting points on the kind of the way you've allocated according to this natural order. I suspect then you've allocated more to what you think will go up like faster relative to Bitcoin. Sammy, you've mentioned in the comments here, I don't know if you want to come in. You think it goes back to what cycle it is? Like, are we in an altcoin cycle, Bitcoin cycle? Like, how are you thinking of allocating, and what do you think of this natural order idea?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if I remember back to the last bull market, there was very much a cycle mentality where Bitcoin would lead, then you'd have the alts explode, and then you'd have like NFTs. And I think we're yet to see that explosion in Bitcoin. I think when that happens, I get the gut feeling that it's going to be a liquidity drain on the entire market, and it's going to go through to Bitcoin. And then eventually, maybe a little bit after, you might see that same into ETH or Sol, or maybe NFTs will be completely different. And it might be completely wrong in the sense that it might become a completely different way of liquidity flowing around. And it's hard to say until it happens that first time. And maybe the market matures a little bit more in the sense that it doesn't follow that same pattern as last time. So it's hard to tell, but I do think that Bitcoin will lead, just because the sheer amount of TVL or liquidity that's in Bitcoin, and you've got that institutional interest, that's probably what's going to pop first. But yeah, I think what we're talking about may ETFs potentially for ETH. So we could see something similar follow then. But yeah, I do think that Bitcoin will lead.
Interesting. I mean, I think it's undoubtedly that Bitcoin will lead. My counterpoint to everything that's been said so far is a kind of simplistic argument, which I've seen shared, and I wonder what people think about this. Would love to hear NFT Stats' thoughts on this in just a second once I've shared it. But thinking about all previous all-time highs and whether or not you completely agree that that is the way to analyze this stuff, Solana is about 50% off, I think. It's already at 114. It got to like 250, 260, I think, all-time high last cycle. Bitcoin is at 50 now. Obviously, the all-time high was 69, I think, or so, something like that. Whereas, so, you know, people are getting fairly close. Whereas ETH is at 2.6 now, with space to go up to 4.8. I think it was at the top last time. That makes me think ETH's severely underperformed and therefore has more room to run at the moment. So I want to hear your thoughts in a second, but would love to throw to Sam first, bring him into the conversation. Sam, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on this very simplistic idea or potential trend?
Well, first of all, yesterday you guys did the life coaching session, and you didn't call on me, but that's okay. I see. I'm always on my laptop, so I can't raise my hand, but it's cool. On this topic, I don't know, man. It's just so arbitrary, and I feel like the issue with crypto is there's no fundamental valuation, so we're always like just reaching for straws for like these theories about like, well, the highest it ever ticked was this. Therefore, to get back to that highest number it ever ticked, there's more upside in this. And I haven't done the analysis, but I really wonder if there's any statistical relevance there. That said, yeah, I think I've personally been buying a bit of like the ETHE, and I know this is US listed, so but like the ETH ETF on Grayscale, just because it's still trading at like a 13% discount to NAV, which if there is an ETF approved, we saw with GBTC that discount collapse. So I kind of think like this trend of people who wanted to get long Bitcoin then turning to ETH, if Bitcoin has rallied too much, could continue. But whatever, it's like we all buy this shit that goes up. And I was, to put in perspective just how little people should listen to my opinion, I was looking at my Robinhood account and I have like 3 Bitcoin on there that are still down because I bought them so at the Pico top last time. So I kind of feel like I need to disqualify myself from any sort of like, because I think I just get that natural tendency to want to buy things when they're going up. Like that's when the stories feel good. And I don't know, I probably shouldn't flood myself so aggressively, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't fudge it too hard either. I think you're probably going to be completely fine in that respect. One, you mentioned the idea that look, we ultimately just want to buy things that go higher. We spoke about this. I don't know if you've seen Fred Krueger, who we have been speaking about on the show a couple of times. He spoke about like 50K being a significant number. Again, we're not saying there is concrete statistical evidence on this stuff, but do you see any significance in 50K as a number potentially, as one where people are going to want to get in? Or do you just think it doesn't really matter anymore? These ETF inflows are just coming irrespective.
Yeah, it feels like the ETF flows are coming in. I just don't know. I just don't want to say something that's off the cuff. And how much does a 50 ETH now? Well, I thought 20 ETH was a relevant number for pudgies, and here we are at 19.3. So we went through 50,000 yesterday, and now we're slightly below. But it really does feel like a lot more people have exposure to Bitcoin right now, and I mean have the easy ability to purchase it, and that like the FOMO trends towards more people are going to lead to more buying. So that really feels like the current trend, and I'm not sure that 50,000 as a number matters all that much either way.
Interesting. That does kind of confirm one of the things we mentioned yesterday, which was a very simple question. Again, trying to do the most simple types of analysis possible to simplify the situation, which is like the question that people could be asking themselves is simply, do you think that inflows from the ETF will increase or decrease? Like on a straightforward level, like are they going up or they're going down? Whether that's at 50K, whether that's at 60K, whether it's at 40K, are they going up or not? That's one of the ways to simplify the situation. Legendary, want to come to you here. What are your thoughts on where the conversation has gone?
Yeah, very much agree with stats. Like we do like to assign that value to arbitrary numbers. I don't know, talk to gamblers going to Vegas, and they're like, this slot hasn't hit its jackpot in a long time, so it will hit it now. And we kind of like to apply the same mentality with the relative lows, right? We've seen it go up so high, so it will go up again. The difference being, however, well, you can't influence a slot, you can definitely influence the market. And if this is like the predominant narrative, and many people are investing just based on that and are hyping up Sol based on that, then I am more likely to want to follow that narrative. Because even if I, personally believe that relative low concept is like utter bullshit, if enough people believe it, the market will move. And if enough people put their money where the mouth is, the market will move into that direction. In terms of your very simple question, will inflows increase or not? I mean, I think we've again seen an increase in inflows. And if you look at it over a long-term perspective, and if you look at it from the perspective of how, say, the average American is working, is allocating their money, is investing in the 401ks, is distributing in the S&P 500, whatever. And if we get to a point that like it's going to be just good practice to have 1%, 2%, whatever, of your investments in cryptocurrencies, in BTC, and that is going to establish itself over the next couple of years, then we'll definitely see incredible amounts of money moving into those ETFs. But I do think that this kind of like behavioral change takes a lot of time, exactly in a similar fashion. Once ETFs were established, it took them some time to be accepted by the market, sure, and then also by like the retail consumer.
Interesting stuff. Just to kind of maybe confirm your point, or for some additional context, if anything, from Fred Krueger, these numbers are his numbers, so we need to verify those. But he, in a recent tweet, shared that the total flows into the ETF is about $6 billion of new long-term money. I think this year will be closer to 50 billion than 10. It might be more than 50. And his suggestion is that we're in a new era. Using old ETF launches as a guide may not apply. Anything is possible. We're quite happy to share these like hyper bullish tweets from Fred. If you haven't listened to his interviews, or he does like he produces videos where he shares his thoughts quite at length. But just be aware, it's like hyper bullish stuff. Not going to get a counter argument there. Sam, you come off mute. Do you have a comment there?
I'm curious, do you know how he defines long-term, or does he just assume anyone who buys an ETF is a long-term holder instead of a trader, or is there like these are flows from institutions?
So when I watched one of his videos over the weekend, and the way he spoke about it was that traditional kind of people in crypto you could describe as hot money. Like, it will be bought, could be traded at a higher price. But yes, the assumption is that the people buying into ETFs are accumulators who will, in essence, just want to accumulate irrespective of the price. So that is the way he was thinking about it.
Got it. Yeah, Hildabi is one of the kind of Dune dashboard creators. He's got a nice Dune dashboard on inflows. And I know that OSF has been tweeting about inflows into ETFs pretty much daily. So those are two accounts you can follow if this is a theme that's interesting. And it should be interesting, because I think it is a very structurally positive thing that's happening right now.
Absolutely. Very good stuff. Sam, wanted to check in with you here. I think we want to try to move on shortly, though we might want to touch in with Matthew and Oxy in a second. Final thoughts on this, Sam? Sammy? Sorry.
I was getting confused then. Yeah, it's interesting, because I think we also saw a bit of a sell the news event. I mean, the GBTC outflows kind of brought Bitcoin down to around about 38, 39K. So those that bought into the ETF around then, they're kind of up 30%. And I think if you're new to crypto, and you're trying to get exposure, all of a sudden you've seen this pump in price from those recent lows that you wouldn't really get elsewhere. So it's kind of getting that taste that we probably had a couple of years ago coming into the space. And I've had so a lot of my friends are in sort of wealth management, private equity, and a lot of their clients have started coming to them saying, how do I get exposure to Bitcoin ETFs? Which ones should I go for? So they've reached out to me. So it's quite interesting seeing that shift in mentality from probably a year ago, where they were really not interested in Bitcoin at all, to all of a sudden that sentiment's completely changed. So I think we're probably going to see a lot more of that coming through.
Good stuff. I like those ideas. Final tweet on this that I just thought would be interesting to bring up to maybe provide some perspective, and moving away from Bitcoin potentially, is this one from Moon. Kind of related, just talking about the bull market that we're in, saying the bull market started in October, November. So it's basically been 4 months so far. They usually last around 2 years. I will come to Matt and Oxy in a second, just to touch on their points on Bitcoin, I guess is still related. Legendary, one of the things we've spoken about privately is like, look, where are we in the cycle? We know when the bull market started. I think we were we were switched onto it when we kept saying like, look, there's so much going on. We can't keep on top of it. That was a big indicator for us on the media side of things that things were picking up. So we're into this period. Moon is saying it usually lasts around 2 years. However, one of the things we've spoken about is it being an election year and the election taking place later this year. How do you think that affects the market? Does it affect the market at all? What are your thoughts there?
Quite a lot of thoughts, actually. So on the bull market starting in October, November, absolutely agree with that. Like, to me, it was shocking to see how many people, even in January, said, no, we're not in a bull market yet, when we had stocks at all-time or very close to all-time highs. When we had that price action in crypto, I was thinking, like, what the fuck do you want to happen that you call it a bull market? Do you need to see the God candle to 250K BTC to finally say, oh, this is the pre-bull, we are heating up? So that level of delusional takes was insane, and forgive me for being that blunt on it. That on the one hand, on the question of the election years are always like quite interesting, but again, like you can observe trends, and many people try to do that in stocks, and you have that theory that typically election years are a bit like rough until the election, and after the election, rough is exaggeration, it's a bit more of a sideways movement. And after the election, then you have that end of year rally, which more often happened than not. But again, it's not like a 100% guarantee. Maybe it happened like in 55% of the cases or whatnot. And then people try to kind of derive a rule by that. So it is very hard to judge that in isolation just because it is an election year, how that will impact the markets. Yes, there's certainly a correlation with that, but there's no like a 100% rule to follow that. If there's an election year, this and that will happen.
I think it's definitely something to look at, and it's one that we would easily be able to look back at to get some of the numbers. So I'd love to hear some of that data if anyone has any thoughts on that specifically. Let's go to Matthew now. Maybe as a kind of someone who follows macro quite closely, are you able to like what's your thought on that point? The fact that we're in an election year, whilst all this bullish sentiment is taking place, whilst we're 4 months into a bull market, do we continue through that and onwards, or does it kind of put a spanner in the middle?
Good morning, everybody. I think really it's only going to come down to a regulatory clarity kind of question. If you see sort of more democratic elections that come through, you'll probably see more strict regulations, and you might see Gary Gensler still in the seat. But if a Republican comes in, you probably see less regulation and sort of less interest in trying to regulate this market, and probably a replacement of Gensler. So I think that's probably, in just a historic sense, that's probably what's going to happen. But a quick note just on the mental number of 50,000 for Bitcoin, which I think is interesting. From a 401k or an ETF perspective, these retail investors now have the opportunity to say, even if they weren't thinking correctly, oh, I don't have enough money to buy one Bitcoin. Now they have ETFs that are priced at $25, $35, $45. And it makes it so much easier for them to really think about that number. And I just think that that's interesting from just a psychological perspective, that 50,000 for us means something, but $45 or $55 in an ETF means something completely different to somebody's 401k.
Very interesting. Maybe that 50K number basically becomes irrelevant because that's what we've been staring at for years, but that's not the number that people will see inside that ETF. So interesting perspective there, Matthew. Thank you for that. I hadn't really thought about that too much. Oxy, your hand is raised. Welcome to the stage, my friend. Final point on this, put a bow on this topic, because then we're going on to Blast.
Yeah, good morning, guys. I hope you can hear me all right. I'm driving, but so I think you guys are right. I think we're kind of just getting started as far as people getting onboarded. I think as this becomes more and more normalized, as far as the conversation between investment advisors or simply 401, like talking to 401k related advisors, I think that's going to drive the market forward. I do want to pose a question, which I know you said you wanted to put a bow in it, but with all this traditional money and these investors coming in, is there a point where there's like a price that these investors want, and like BlackRock and so on, want the price of Bitcoin to stay at to a point where it's like too big to fail, if you will. Like if you look at traditional stocks, there's like earnings per share that come out that change the sentiment. Outside of a regulatory change, like there's nothing going to change once the sentiment of Bitcoin stabilizes, if you will. Is there like a point where I guess the price is what BlackRock wants it to be, or is that just not really possible with Bitcoin? Maybe, I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
Interesting question.
One thought I have, if it's okay,
Yeah, go for
is
it.
I feel like people misunderstand BlackRock. BlackRock is just an ETF. So BlackRock owns iShares. BlackRock owns IBIT. So when people say BlackRock is the largest money manager, that's because the SPY ETF is run by BlackRock, but they don't own the S&P 500. They just have this vehicle that collects literally like 5 basis points of fees or 12 basis points of fees on IBIT. And I feel like BlackRock gets misclassified as this like big evil entity when they're just an ETF provider, and they're not the ones who actually own the underlying assets. People say BlackRock owns a ton because I personally have a lot of S&P 500 exposure via the SPY ETF, but that's my S&P 500. That is not BlackRock's. They're just collecting a 2 basis point, 3 basis point fee on it. So, that's one thing about them. But I personally don't think that they have.
They do have to hold the assets.
It's not the type of player that I think wants to put risk capital down to fight a market. That's just not their role in this game. But that's my view, and I'm one of the least conspiratorial people in this entire industry.
Thank you for that clarification, Sam. Matthew, did you have a question there before we move on?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, like, they have to own some underlying shares. They have to own Bitcoin 1-to-1 in order to operate the ETF. So there's really no price at which I think Bitcoin has to go to where BlackRock isn't interested in holding it. What they're doing right now, though, is hoarding inventory so that they can go sell the shares to retail investors when the time is right for them at higher cost basis. So they actually net the benefit of buying now and then selling to investors later. And that's why they don't care about the price of Bitcoin. They're buying as much as they can now to sell later.
They're not buying, though. They just buy when market makers buy, not BlackRock.
But they still
BlackRock's
hold the
not like
assets.
going long a
They
shitload
still
of
have to
Bitcoin
hold
here,
the
hoping they
assets.
can sell higher and then taking risks that it goes down and loses tons and tons of money if it goes down.
But they have to hold the assets 1-to-1 on a spot ETF.
Exactly, but it's not their risk. The way you're talking about it, they're like trying to buy and take on that risk where they make money if it goes up, but also lose a ton of money if it goes down. That's just not their business. They're not like an ETF provider is not a risk taker.
Interesting stuff. Look, I think if people are more interested in the kind of technicalities of how they accumulate the Bitcoin, I'd be grateful if anyone could share like any kind of articles in the comments that might be helpful. But we want to move on. I think Legendary, you had a final point, and then we're going to get onto this blast opportunity and just whatever's going on in that ecosystem. We want to get to there pretty quickly. Legendary, final point.
Yeah, I think if you look at how the ETFs worked and how you have the market makers taking the risk and how you saw that with the GBTC outflows, with the exact process, it's a very complicated process. It's like 11 steps until that has the market makers in there, that has the in and outflows of the day, that has all those different announcements that have to be made. I'm trying to find that graphic. It's actually pretty interesting to see how complicated the ETF is and how it works in the TradFi world versus our world. On the second point, I don't think that BlackRock, agree with Sam, there has like a price target. If anything, the right KPI, in my opinion, to look at is, and that BlackRock probably is interested in, is how many people own one of their ETFs, how many people are invested in BTC via the ETFs, and what is like the penetration that they can achieve like in that addressable market. And on the point that I made earlier, when I said like election years typically tend to be like weaker in the first half and stronger in the second half because of the end year rally after the election, I did try to find some data backing it up because I didn't have it at hand. If you look at the Dow Jones return in presidential years or in presidential election years, in the second half averages 8.6 versus 3% in all other years. However, the net full year result is that there's virtually no performance difference between presidential and non-presidential years. So you might have the trend that people are waiting until the election, then the market moves. But in general, over like a full year, it doesn't make any difference if you're in an election year or not.
Very interesting. I'd love for you to share that legendary in the comments so people can attack that and just see that raw data as well. That'd be interesting to see. Okay, we've spoken about that to death. Hope that's been interesting. We also spoke about Bitcoin yesterday as well, so we definitely want to move on to Blast and also talk about this Ordinals drop on Bitcoin. Got 10 minutes for each. Let's get into Blast first. Interesting tweet which was shared by NFT Asian, which I'm going to share on the YouTube and on X video and read out for you if you're just listening in. They said Blast has introduced over 40 projects so far for their upcoming Big Bang competition starting at the end of the week. Based on the potential level given by Blast, I've charted the projects and it's kind of what's he done? He's put them into different categories, which the title of the categories are tremendous, enormous, substantial, undeniable, extraordinary, and astronomical. So I don't think this is like a scientific breakdown of what will be guaranteed success or not. So you have to take those categories with a pinch of salt. However, the reason why this is so helpful, and again, you can get to this via the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Click on, actually, can you do that? I don't know if I included it. I think I did. If I didn't, I'll put it in the comments now. The reason why this is so helpful is because Blast obviously just announced that 3,000 teams have registered for their Big Bang competition. If you've been under a rock, Blast is the L2, which is run by Pac-Man, the creator of Blur, and has got now more than $1.5 billion locked in the multi-sig that people just sent over because they trusted Pac-Man to build something interesting. And now all of these people are going to be building interesting protocols on top of Blast. What happens then is that all of that capital that's on Blast is most likely going to be either incentivized or just want to explore Blast. So we're moving into that period of time now where we want to see what is being built out on Blast to know what to do with that capital, because we didn't just send it there for completely no reason. I know people are expecting an airdrop, but we're assuming there's going to be some stuff to do there. And so this is a very helpful list because it puts all in one place the things which are being built. And I hadn't seen a kind of, this is probably not a complete list, but at least it's a list, a significant list of a lot of the things which are being built. So I just want to go to Sammy first. What are your thoughts on Blast at the moment? What are your thoughts on some of these projects building out there? What's your kind of latest thinking on this at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to fade Pac-Man after some pretty successful rounds with Blur. So I like to think that you have products and distribution. So that product side of things, I know there wasn't an L2 built as at the time when everyone was depositing, but you'd like to think that there's something that's tangible when it comes to fruition. I think it's in May. I know unlocks are in Feb, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that product lays out. But if you've got a lot of developers that are incentivized to build on Blast, more likely than not, there's going to be something that comes out of it that's really interesting, and it could be pretty lucrative in terms of applications. So that's the product side. But the distribution side, you've got all these people with significant amounts of vested interest. I know Ovi put in 1K. There's a lot of bigger whales that have put significantly more in there that have some pretty big voices on the timeline. So that side of things is almost a distribution where you hear it on the timeline. Crypto Twitter is where you go to for the first point of call. That captures attention. So I think you've got two sides of things where you've got product, you've got distribution. So it could be a very lucrative outcome where those that deposited the Blast, maybe they get an allocation of various applications. And I think that will then incentivize other people to build on it. So it might be this self-perpetuating upward cycle of Blast doing really well. But it'll be interesting to see how it comes out. Obviously, it comes down to execution. And they've had a good track record. So in terms of placing a bet, it's not bad.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed the thesis right there, or you towards the end, you just nailed it. The idea is if you have bridged a certain amount of capital over to Blast, now these new protocols are launching, and in order to get your attention, they're saying sign up to our thing. Dependent on how much you've bridged over, we are going to now allocate you a certain number of our tokens. Then maybe there becomes a separate farming process for them. But this is literally what is happening. I signed up for 2 in the last 2 days. I'm sure there's going to be countless more leveraging that idea. But just so people are aware, that is what's happening. The 2 that I signed up for because I saw other people share it, for no particular reason other than that. I don't know much about the protocols, but I think one was called BlasterFi, which is a DEX, and then there was, I think there was another DEX. I can't remember the name of the other DEX. Oh, Risk. There's another one called Risk Protocol or something like that. So those are just 2 that basically gave me tokens in their protocol, like pre-tokens, because they don't actually exist yet. They gave me these pre-tokens because I have deposited a certain amount into Blast. So just definitely be aware that that is something that's happening, and there exists an opportunity in that. I don't know whether that opportunity is past for newer participants. Like, we've obviously deposited for a long time. So, you have to consider, like, is it a bit too late in the game to get involved? I don't know the perfect answer to that, but there's clearly going to be an explosive ecosystem on Blast, I think, because of how much capital that there is there, kind of what you mentioned as well, Sammy, about how many people's vested interests are also involved. And generally, just because Pac-Man built like an awesome product with Blur, I think he's, there's a reasonable chance he does something strong with this too, especially from the marketing perspective. And this idea that they're launching with this competition for developers, like, that's just not been done before. Everything else gets launched, and how are you supposed to figure out what's going on in the protocol? We've never known when other L2s have launched. We've never known what's going on. Like, someone has to tell you, oh, by the way, that's the main DEX on StarkNet or whatever. Whereas this is like, this stuff's going to be in your face, and they're going to be pushing the winners of the competition. So genius from a marketing perspective. Legendary, want to touch in with you here, and would love to go to NFT stats as well, because I know he's been very, very, I don't want to say bullish if it's not bullish, but like definitely speaking about Blast a reasonable amount. Hear his thoughts in a second. Legendary first.
Yeah, just because you asked the question earlier where we are in the market, I think if you look at that post by NFT Asian and you see a list of protocols where the worst ranking is tremendous potential, the second worst is enormous, and it goes all the way up to astronomical, it kind of tells you about like the market sentiment and the greed that we are currently seeing in the market. In terms of the Blast hypothesis, I think Sammy put it perfectly. Very much agree with what he said. And market-wise, obviously, it has been done before by L2s, right? There are grant programs you could have applied, get token grants on Arbitrum, etc. But just doing that as a competition and having that like pending airdrop reward for all the participants in both the Blast token and then the native token, and just the narrative that is being told with that is so more marketing friendly and so more attractive for the timeline that while technically it has been done before, the narrative and the marketing behind it is just next level. It's very, very smart in that perspective.
Very fair enough. NFT stats, Sam, would love your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on this kind of big bang competition taking place at the end of the week and where Blast is going?
I mean, you knew from the beginning that they were giving an equal share of airdrop, not just to people who deposited, but then they're going to give an equal share to people who were developers and who built on Blast. So I think that we saw this coming. I think over the past few months, I've seen people noticing it and building, like putting together projects. Because I mean, my kind of baseline assumption, and who knows if this is right, but let's say that Blast goes to a $10 billion fully diluted valuation, and my guess is that 6% is going to go to developers. That is a $600 million pool of airdrop that is available to people. And I think it's part of how Pac-Man is just so good at this game of figuring out how to create activity and how to create big headlines and how to create, and a lot of it is authentically good. So I'd say it doesn't surprise me in light of the amount of money that will probably be at play here for people. And I think I kind of feel like as NFT people, we've just seen that process of people doubting Pac-Man and people taking issues with the way he does things, kind of transferring into the fact that no one can deny that he has delivered insane amount of money to people who have kind of like done the things he wants them to do. And I think we're kind of seeing that whole thing play out now in crypto, just with a much, much bigger total addressable market. So I don't know. I feel underexposed to Blast, and I've put a fair bit in. It just feels like a very low risk way to get outsized returns relative to other low risk plays out there. But perhaps that's a poor man's last words.
Very interesting stuff. Yeah, I agree with people taking issue with Pac-Man. I don't know, kind of the incentives that he creates and this and that. They kind of create different reasons to criticize, and I think it's very easy to criticize, right? Like things might not be able to be executed perfectly or in a way that can please everyone, and you certainly can't please everyone, but you can't deny the return of value. Sam, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been one of the most critical people of Blur, and I stand by everything I've criticized, and I think it's truer now than ever. At the same time, you know, like I don't think a lot of the incentive structures are doing what he intended them to do. I think they're having different impact than what he intended to do. That said, it is non-negotiable. It is non-negotiable. It's factual that he has given something like $300 million in cash that people can go, like real cash that people can go use to buy houses in less than a year to people who've done the things he wants them to do. Like, it is just like, he's just extremely good at this stuff. So, you know, and despite my criticisms, I also have a lot that I'm complimentary of that he's done as well. It's a mixed bag, but the one thing that is not subjective is just the sheer amount of money that people have made in his ecosystem.
Very fair points. The final point I wanted to make on Blast before we do the Web3 roundup, get you up to speed with what else has been going on in the space, and then get on to the Ordinals news in the last kind of 7 minutes of the show, is that Sam mentioned how there's this big pool going to developers. The thing that I've noticed, and the thing for everyone to be aware of, is that, this is my understanding, it's not, when you're going to go and use these protocols on Blast, you're not only going for that protocol's native token, which is, I assume, one of the things that will happen for the protocol, but they're also further incentivizing you by taking a portion of their Blast airdrop and saying, if you use us, if you mint our collection, you're going to get allocated a portion of our Blast developer token. So this is like airdrop farming on steroids, because not only are you participating because you're interested in that protocol's token, they're actually saying, look, we're going to get this amount of Blast airdrop tokens for being the developers on there, and we're going to give that to you as well. Like, we're going to give you a portion of that as well. So there's just extra layers going on here, and just wanted to bring that to attention to people, because that's one of the things we see as something that could be potentially quite explosive in the next week or two, and maybe even more moving forward. Right, we want to do the Web3 snapshot to get you up to speed with what else has been going on in space in the last 24 hours. And we want to hit this Bitcoin Ordinals news, which I also think is something else we've got to keep on top of, as if there's not enough already. So from the snapshot, which is pinned up top, first you have Magic Eden announcing marketplace launch on the 27th of February. That's pretty big news, because it's going to be very focused on creators and enforcing royalties. So that conversation will definitely come back to the timeline. Next, Meta Capital Institutional Fund announces partnership with NFT lending protocol Arcade. That's pretty cool to see. They focus on like more rare NFTs and providing liquidity for those, which has kind of disappeared since Blur has taken over. Next, Solana Mobile hits 100,000 pre-orders within 30 days. That's pretty impressive. Next, Pudgy Gaming Council announces its first members, with lots of prominent gamers on the timeline. Moving on, Grant Yun announces a solo show in Seoul, South Korea with Avant Art. And finally, Magic Eden Marketplace announces a partnership with Limit Break to preserve creator royalties. That's the roundup from the rest of the space. Let's get into the final headline, which is this Karma Coin news, which Jason Fang suggests is the largest fungible token airdrop in Ordinals history. So very significant. And this is, and remember, Karma Coin is the token from the OCM. Someone help me. What does it stand for again? I know.
On-chain monkey.
That's the one. I knew the acronym. Just forgot the thing. Thanks, Jack. The on-chain monkey ecosystem, they've decided to move fully over to Bitcoin, or try to move fully over to Bitcoin. Karma Coin is going to be their coin, and these are the communities that they want to airdrop to. Node Monkeys, Bitcoin Puppets, Bitmap, Arsic, Bitcoin Frogs, Bitcoin Punks, and Ordinal Maxi Biz. Those 7, notably Quantum Cats are not included. Want to double, triple check that is definitely the case, but that seems to be a notable omission at this point. Maybe let's go to Sammy.eth first. What are your thoughts on Karma Coin, the selection of projects on Bitcoin to which OCM want to airdrop? Any particular thoughts on that? And actually, we'd love to hear Jack's thoughts on this as well, given that I know he knows the founders over at On-Chain Monkey a little bit more. Sammy first.
Yeah, I think the allocation of tokens to a specific group of people makes sense, and we saw that with the gods and the wormhole airdrop. I think this one is obviously specific to Bitcoin Ordinals, and they've been very selective. I am a little bit confused about the Quantum Cats. I don't know to what extent the Taproot Wizards could get exposure, but maybe there's an assumption that there's an overlap with these communities anyway that would automatically get that airdrop allocation had Quantum Cats been included. But yeah, it's a good way to reward those, or try and get those people that are in there into the OCM ecosystem. So yeah, smart. Keen to hear Jack's thoughts though, because he probably has a lot more context or understanding as to what's going on.
Yeah, good points. Jack, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts here on this airdrop news and the selection of communities?
First of all, just love the idea that I have more context because I have bags in a project, because unfortunately I just don't keep that up to date with these projects that I do that. But that being said, yeah, Danny does know the team at Taproot pretty well. Like they've had a lot of sort of overlap in the past, so that's really interesting to me. The Karma drop, it is a community coin drop, so it isn't the OCM team. It is the OCM community alongside a partnership with a token expert. So I think for me, it's interesting. Obviously, you mentioned the rug token the other day on the show, B-Check, where essentially that was going to be dropped to a number of projects. It confused the life out of me. I had a number of projects that had access to the drop. I used Saturn, which was basically the token protocol that you could access, view the token. It literally, I don't know how much I have that has been allocated. I don't know how it works. I just couldn't access it. No, and it told me that I had access, I definitely had the green light.
Yeah, me too.
Could not understand the thing. So I think this is more of a drop. I expect this to be on the more popular wallets like Xverse and the Ordinal wallets that you can actually just visibly see this thing almost immediately.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see.
This is great context, because this kind of sets the scene for where Bitcoin is right now. And it makes me think two things. One, I completely agree with you. Very, very difficult to navigate. The rug token didn't work for me. Apparently, I didn't have the BTC in the right place, or maybe even my wallet wasn't even eligible. So there's a couple of takeaways. One, Bitcoin is really hard to use right now still. Typically, that has historically presented a good opportunity for people who are too lazy to try to figure it out and figure out what's going on. But the second thing is, you've got to be really aware, there are certain wallets specifically that just don't work, or people are not building for at the moment. So you mentioned Xverse there, Jack. I think Xverse seems to be one of the wallets which is compatible with whatever people are doing. I was trying to use this Bitcoin lending protocol the other day called Liquidium, and it's you can't use any other wallet that is not Xverse. So definitely worth thinking about when it comes to doing whatever you're doing on Bitcoin. It's definitely something which I want to figure out more. Just a final thought from me moving forward, and what I'd like to do tomorrow, because there's so much going on. We've gone from Bitcoin to Blast, well, we've gone from Bitcoin itself to Bitcoin Ordinals, then to Blast in between. There's a lot going on. Would love maybe in tomorrow's show in the introduction section for Legendary, Sammy and I to kind of rank where our attention is most at the moment, because I think that might be a helpful conversation for people tomorrow. But we have unfortunately run out of time for today's show. We are very thankful for you joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Legendary for co-hosting as always. Thank you to Sammy for joining us up on stage and on camera too, and all of the rest of our speakers, NFT Stats, Sam, Matthew, Jack, Oxy. We are very grateful for you joining us. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we will be back with you tomorrow. Bye-bye.